grits made in New Orleans.
I understand.
Because we make it buttery and creamy.
You make everything great in New Orleans.
You know, what can I say? Marjorie, you're listening to this. Marjorie Clifton is joining us from D.C. You have any comments about grits before we get started?
All I can say is now I'm really hungry. And also being a girl from the South, the fried okra has got me not focused anymore.
Where are you from, Marjorie?
I'm from Texas.
Oh, where in Texas?
I grew up in Houston and then lived in Austin for about 9 years.
You are my girl. I love both of those places. I think we had this discussion before. Alrighty, so let's talk politics now. We just are following up on Jonathan Seri's important report there from Blythewood, South Carolina. You know, the main takeaway for me was that even though you've got a lot of the folks there looking, you know, you've got the fiscal conservative crowd there, you have some religious conservatives there, the main takeaway was that they're pragmatic overall and they're striving. They want to strive for electability. So let's start there, Marjorie. And what does that say to you?
Well, if that truly is the case, I think it would be a given for Romney, but I'm not convinced. And I think the amount of advertising being spent in the state, I mean, right now, Mitt Romney's spending $3 million worth of advertising, Gingrich topping it with $3.4 million worth of advertising just in South Carolina alone. They estimate that the population of South Carolina, just as of yesterday, saw 5,500 ads, and they're being completely inundated. And this new conversation about, you know, what is it to be a true capitalist and Romney's work at Bain is really going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because I think it could change things slightly.
What do you say, Ed?
Well, that's a lot of advertising, and I'm sure there's a lot more some of the other sides that we're throwing in. I mean, that's the equivalent of a $50 million campaign in New York, and especially in a 10-day period. You know, there's no candidate that's evolved as the conservative leader yet. Obviously, Santorum sort of got that title out of Iowa, but they were running, the three conservatives were running 4, 5, and 6 in New Hampshire, so no one came out of there with a real bounce. This will be the battle. If Perry doesn't win or come in second, he's done. If Gingrich doesn't do first or second, he's pretty much done. And I think to a certain extent, Santorum is still trying to get to the top of this heap. You know, so it's you know, at the end of the day, if Romney wins here, you have to understand this state was set up by the late Lee Atwater for George H.W. Bush to be ahead of the Southern primary. It used to be the Super Tuesday was on a Tuesday, and this became a Saturday. There is nothing following this but Florida. So this has become an important state in its own right. My sense is it'll be a very close final. They're all going to battle right down to the final day, and the vote changes. We have two big debates, Fox debate next week, and that could clearly alter somewhat the perception. But I think what you end up with is one conservative and one front runner who's Romney to go on, and then the difference this time, too, is you've got these super PACs that even though these people may not have campaigns or normal organization, some individuals have basically funded Santorum, have funded Gingrich, and may keep them in the race beyond what they normally would have the capacity to do.
Marjorie?
Yeah, I would say everything about this race is unusual. And this entire campaign season has been about the anyone but Romney opportunity. And I was laughing because Jon Stewart said last night that, or I guess it was Stephen Colbert was saying, that Romney was the first non-incumbent to win both Iowa and New Hampshire and still not be liked by anybody. So he really hasn't won the public, but at the same time, I think it is sort of obvious that he is the one that would be the best contender to Obama in a presidential election. So it goes back to that pragmatism versus passion. And passion can always surprise us. You know, and everyone says, and the truth of the matter is that there's never been a Republican president that did not win South Carolina. So that's what makes South Carolina such a critical state. But at the same time, Romney won both Iowa and New Hampshire, which had never been done before as well. So his losing South Carolina, I don't know if that would be indicative of the future of the campaign for him. Because South Carolina is a very different state. I mean, it is not indicative of the rest of the country. It doesn't play to the independents and the more centrist Republicans that are out there. And I think that's actually where his sweet spot is.
Then picking up on that, then, Ed, what do you make of the endorsement by South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley of Romney? Is this going to help him or hurt him in the
I would rather have it than not have it. Obviously, the governor, who was elected by Tea Party, has basically run into a lot of opposition by Tea Party people by her endorsement of Romney, and there's talk of recalls and what have you. At the end of the day, it's all about delegates. You need 1,144 delegates. This is the first closed primary, meaning only only Republicans get to vote in Iowa and New Hampshire. Independents and Democrats who wanted to switch could do it. This is all about Republicans. In South Carolina, Republicans divide into conservatives. Who's the most conservative is always the argument, and my sense is there's not a conservative has not come out of this yet as the singular candidate.
And what about Santorum?
Santorum, obviously, the interesting thing is you got two Southerners in this race. You got Perry as a Texan, and you got Gingrich who represented Georgia. They talk Southern. They understand the dialogue a little better. Santorum fit Pennsylvania. Santorum, fit Iowa. He was like Grassley. He was kind of a policy wonk. He spent unlimited time there. Didn't really focus on anything else. He doesn't get to do that. He's driving around the state in a pickup truck with Iowa license plates. I promise you that will not go well.
Yeah, rent a local car, right?
Right, that's what you
right. I can't wait to see if Gingrich puts on a Southern twang when he arrives. It's like the Bush days. But Perry's definitely got that down, if people can understand him. But, the other interesting thing is the fact that Jim DeMint has not endorsed anyone, and he endorsed Romney the last go-round back in 2004. So it's going to be, I think the Tea Party faction is going to be a very challenging one for both Gingrich and Romney. And so I'm wondering if Perry will carry that Tea Party group, because the Tea Party still hasn't sort of forgiven Gingrich as a Washington insider, given his work with Fannie Mae. And so with Romney, it's all about his mandate on health care in Massachusetts was the absolute naysay to the Tea Party. So I don't know what's going to happen with them.
We are bringing in another guest here on set with me. David Webb is joining us. David, so funny. I was recently I saw you on another Fox program. I'm not sure if it was Hannity or the election coverage, and I was like, I haven't seen David in a long time. So here you are. I love having you here. Thank you. Happy New Year. David, you guys know he is the co-founder of Tea Party 365, and he has the David Webb Show on Sirius XM Radio. It's doing really, really well. So
he has that golden voice.
He has the golden voice, and he has a lot of good information.
Well, I just got back from New Hampshire last night, so after 5 days, it's a little tired voice, but exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. I want to bring in David into the conversation, but right now, let me pull up an ad from Gingrich that's going to be playing heavily there in South Carolina.
Mitt Romney became CEO of Bain Capital the day the company was formed. His mission? To reap massive rewards for himself and his investors.
Mitt Romney, them guys, they don't care who I am.
He's for small businesses. No, he isn't. He's not.
You're going to be on the hit list, you know that.
Okay, David Webb, Gingrich is planning to bring the heat to South Carolina. In particular, his target is Romney. How do you think this is going to play?
So far, and based on what I've seen in New Hampshire, after crisscrossing the state and talking with a lot of the New Hampshire residents who are similar in their independence streak to a lot of South Carolina voters on the economy and issues, blowback. Gingrich went after Romney, for instance, in New Hampshire, and he brought Romney down about 3 to 4 points, I believe, Ed, but it also brought him down about 4 to 5 points. South Carolina is an interesting state. The Tea Party, of course, which I'm in touch with, they play an important role there, but I wouldn't put them in any one camp or the other as I talk to Tea Party leaders. What I am looking at, though, and what a lot of people are looking at is state economics. Whether it was the NLRB battle, whether it's a company like BMW that moves to Columbia, you have a state that has an unemployment issue. It's 10% in South Carolina,
higher than the
and a right-to-work state.
Right.
So when Gingrich attacks Bain Capital, when Gingrich attacks free market principles, he doesn't endear himself to the Tea Party. And when Perry says vulture capitalism or Santorum and they all pile on, think about this interesting dynamic. Ron Paul in New Hampshire was defending Mitt Romney. Gingrich on Fox this morning wouldn't let Eric Bolin redirect a question about free market because in the free market there's risk and there's failure. And Bain, in large part, 22% of complete, if you want to call it, companies that were sold off. But they have about a 70% record overall as a VC firm when the average is about 60% considered successful. So, here's where Gingrich fails in a couple of phrases. He talks about Romney, who, unlike Obama, didn't socialize the risk and privatize the gain with Solyndra, with GM, with other things by using taxpayer dollars. This was private money. It's not resonating with voters.
Go ahead, Marjorie.
Well, no, I would say, and the thing that I find very interesting is the fact that Gingrich actually was an advisor to Forston Little and Company, which does the exact same thing as Bain. And so he's worked in the private equity world, and this is what I find just wholly ironic.
You know, to add to that, by the way, when they continue to attack Bain, Gingrich has to remember that whatever is being asked and the questions he wants asked of Mitt Romney,
right, it's going to be asked.
It's going to be asked of him.
Absolutely.
And that's a trap for Gingrich.
Well, the dilemma Gingrich has is he doesn't know what his message is. As a brilliant guy who's done very well in the debates, and that's his form. And people said, "Gee, we like him." 4 weeks ago, he was the front runner everywhere because of his intelligence in the debate forum. Has not put forth a game plan. He's been all over the place. He's going to attack Bain, then the next day he's not going to attack Bain. He's going to attack Romney, then he's not. And what is it about him?
And then he goes and does an event with Jim Clyburn,
right, which is
a guy who has attacked him and attacks Republicans, a far-left progressive, by his own actions.
Right.
And Gingrich does an event with him on housing, which is more government intervention and something that needs to be resolved in a private market. You're right, Ed.
Who's responsible for the kind of appearing to be? Yeah,
Gingrich.
I mean,
you're the boss.
You know, I've known Newt for a long time, and we've been friends and we've been allies, and some days we've even been on the opposite side of some fights. He is brilliant. He needs to have a discipline. He needs to have outside advisors and inside advisors who have the strength to basically stand up and say, that's an idiotic idea. You got to be consistent. He had an all-star team when he started this thing. They all left him because of his lack of discipline, going off to Greece. And now he's trying to do it by himself. He and Callista are basically calling the shots. And he criticized all the consultants who went out and worked for independent PACs and knocked his teeth out. I mean, no one has had a higher rise and fall than Newt Gingrich does. And now basically it's about revenge on Romney as opposed to promoting himself. And he's got an extraordinary story if he tells it, but he's not telling it well.
Hey, and go ahead, Marjorie.
No, and I would say I just think that this is all a trigger from desperation. I mean, this is something that the Perry campaign has gotten on the bandwagon, and I've been laughing over Perry calling it vulture capitalism, because Perry is the true vulture here. I mean, he's feeding off of anything he can find, and absolutely, I mean, it's over for him, but he won't let it up. And so I think that it's the only thing they could find to go after. And typically, as you go into somewhere like Iowa and New Hampshire, their messaging is so much the same that it becomes these nitpicky little things that they try to use to differentiate themselves. And the truth of the matter is that they're very similar.
But David, is it over for Perry in South Carolina? Because South Carolina is a right-to-work state, so is Texas, so there's that connection. And, you know, Perry has embraced the whole Tea Party platform?
Well, he's embraced it. Rick Santorum came out of Iowa saying, I'm the Tea Party guy. Everybody tries to be the Tea Party guy. Here's the reality. The Tea Party are the voters who decide on principles. It's not about me. It's not about anybody whose name is at the, quote, head of a Tea Party. There isn't one. The principles are there. Perry cannot pick up. He was 1% in New Hampshire. He got a few more votes than Buddy Roemer, if you want to look at it that way. He just doesn't have it to pick up in South Carolina. When you look at it, it would be a big surprise if he did. Can he and Santorum fight it out and somehow beat Gingrich, who's going to take from the Perry Santorum supporters, for lack of a better group?
Ed, let's talk about someone we haven't spoken about yet this morning, and the chatters are definitely wanting to know what your thoughts are about Ron Paul.
Listen, Ron Paul is in this to the end. He has his own constituency. It may not be as big and large in South Carolina, but he's not going away. And if these other people drop by the wayside, Ron Paul, at the end of the day, could end up the second most amount of delegates. He's going to get delegates. When everybody else in February goes home and tries to regroup and raise money, he's going to continue in the caucus battles. His voters are not going away. They're dedicated. Long term, we need them. Long term, they're young voters. Not everything that he advocates mainstream Republicans believe in, but we need his voters back. And I'm a great believer and always have been in addition.
But however, do you feel, and Marjorie, I want you to chime in on this specifically, Ed saying that the Republican Party needs to have the Paul voters being the young voters, the independent voters, because regardless, once they get into the GOP pool, perhaps they'll hold them. But will they hold them? Because they're very specific on what Ron Paul stands for and not necessarily so much what the GOP party in general stands for.
No, I agree. That is a big question. I don't know that they will hold. I mean, Ron Paul is not a legitimate option as in terms of a nominee because of his belief in legalization of drugs and his position on the military. And that in itself, I think, is going to kill him in South Carolina. I mean, it's a big military industry town, a big military town. And so that I don't think that's going to play for him in South Carolina. But he, I think, of any of the candidates, actually has almost more conviction and has been consistent throughout on his positions, on everything. He is the only one, I think, that has been consistent every time he speaks. Now, I don't necessarily agree with all of his positions, but with that same conviction, I think, is going to keep him in the race as long as he can go and until the funding runs out.
Well, his funding won't run out. He was the last man standing 4 years ago, and he had 3 times the amount of votes this time in New Hampshire. Obviously, in Iowa, he made a tactical mistake that he was out of the state a couple days before the primary. He went home on a Thursday and came back on a Monday. He had great momentum there, and his people, I've seen his people here in New York, 200 of them, standing out in front of NBC with signs in a pouring rainstorm. And I came out and I thought to myself, there's not another candidate anywhere that could have that kind of support. His people are going to be there. And once again, we can't let him write the platform, but you certainly need to listen to him. You need to give him a place in this party because he has a son.
And like Ed, I believe in the addition of this, but you also got to look at Ron Paul for the reality. He has a ceiling.
Yes, he does.
He has a ceiling of support. We happen to be in the same hotel this past week in New Hampshire. So his people were there, and when you look at it, they're very dedicated. They have the conviction. But when Ron Paul, if anyone leaves the Ron Paul camp for another, he doesn't gain from anyone else. He has a ceiling in his voting base. We need him in the end in that respect, and I think they'll come home because the alternative will be ABO, anybody but Obama.
Well,
That's
what we desperately need, we desperately don't need him to go run as a third party.
Oh,
and that's the danger.
Go ahead, Marjorie. Go ahead.
I don't think he's going to run as a third party. What I've been saying is that he will step out and step aside in order to preserve his son's opportunities, right. Rand Paul, in a potential future election. So I mean, I agree. His supporters are phenomenal, and in New Hampshire, I just got back as well last night, and they were at every event, regardless of candidate, and they came out in a force that no other campaign had. And so I think that passion is something that would benefit the Republican Party, but I'm not convinced that he can hang on to those, especially the independents that he draws. Right. I don't think he can hang on to them.
Marjorie, I'm going to lose you. So do you have any final thoughts before you go?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh.
Anything you'd like to say?
The menu in South Carolina sounds phenomenal, and no. I mean, I think I think everybody's blowing up South Carolina as it's going to be this crazy revolutionary race. I'm convinced that in the end it's going to come down to a Gingrich-Romney battle, but I don't know that it's going to be indicative of who the ultimate nominee is, which is why the campaigns are already spending the money they are in Florida and looking to Florida as the next place to go. So. We'll see. It'll be fun to watch.
Marjorie Clifton, National Independent Editor of GoVote.com. At Marjorie Clifton is her Twitter handle. Thank you, Marjorie. Good to see you.
And check out
Marjorie.
Hang on, because I want to